no shoes nor stirrups, and resting their hands on their thighs, easy and comfortable. There must have been 20 of 'em, and every lady with a lovely complexion, and perfectly beautiful, and looking just like a gang of real sure-enough queens, and dressed in clothes that cost millions of dollars, and just littered with diamonds. It was a powerful fine sight. I never see anything so lovely. And then one by one they got up and stood, and went a-weaving around the ring, so gentle and wavy and graceful, the men looking ever so tall and airy and straight, with their heads bobbing and skimming along, away up there under the tent roof, and every lady's rose-leafy dress flapping soft and silky round her hips, and she looking like the most loveliest parasol. And then faster and faster they went, all of them dancing, first one foot out in the air and then the other, the horses leaning more and more, and the ringmaster going round and round the center pole, cracking his whip and shouting, "Hi! Hi!" and the clown cracking jokes behind him. And by all hands dropped the reins, and every lady put her knuckles on her hips, and every gentleman folded his arms, and then how the horses did lean over and hump themselves. And so one after the other they all skipped off into the ring, and made the sweetest bow I ever see, and then scampered out, and everybody clapped their hands and went just about wild. Well, all through the circus they done the most astonishing things, and all the time that clown carried on so it most killed the people. The ringmaster couldn't ever say a word to him, but he was back at him quick as a wink with the funniest things a body ever said, and how he ever could think of so many of them, and so sudden and so pat, was what I couldn't no way understand. Why, I couldn't have thought of them in a year, and by a drunk man tried to get into the ring, said he wanted to ride, said he could ride as well as anybody that ever was. They argued and tried to keep him out, but he wouldn't listen, and the whole show come to a standstill. Then the people begun to holler at him and make fun of him, and that made him mad, and he begun to rip and tear, so that stirred up the people, and a lot of men begun to pile down off of the benches and swarm towards the ring, saying, "Knock 'em down! Throw 'em out!" One or two women begun to scream. So then the ringmaster he made a little speech and said he hoped there wouldn't be no disturbance, and if the man would promise he wouldn't make no more trouble, he would let him ride if he thought he could stay on the horse. So everybody laughed and said all right, and the man got on. The minute he was on, the horse begun to rip and tear and jump and cavort around, with 2 circus men hanging on to his bridle, trying to hold him, and the drunk man hanging on to his neck, and his heels flying in the air every jump, and the whole crowd of people standing up shouting and laughing till tears rolled down. And alas, sure enough, all the circus men could do, the horse broke loose, and away he went like the very nation, round and round the ring with that sot laying down on him and hanging to his neck, with first one leg hanging most to the ground on one side, and then the other one on the other side, and the people just crazy. It warn't funny to me, though. I was all of a tremble to see his danger. But pretty soon he struggled up a straddle and grabbed the bridle, a-reeling this way and that, and the next minute he sprung up and dropped the bridle and stood, and the horse a-going like a house afire, too. He just stood up there, a-sailing around as easy and comfortable as if he warn't ever drunk in his life, and then he begun to pull off his clothes and sling them. He shed them so thick they kind of clogged up the air, and altogether he shed 17 suits. And then there he was, slim and handsome and dressed the gaudiest and prettiest you ever saw, and he lit into that horse with his whip and made him fairly hum, and finally skipped off and made his bow and danced off to the dressing-room, and everybody just a-howling with pleasure and astonishment. Then the ringmaster, he see how he'd been fooled, and he was the sickest ringmaster you ever see, I reckon. Why, it was one of his own men. He had got up that joke all out of his own head, and never let on to nobody. Well, I felt sheepish enough to be took in so, but I wouldn't have been in that ringmaster's place, not for $1,000. I don't know, there may be bullier circuses than what that one was, but I never struck them yet. Anyways, it was plenty good enough for me, and wherever I run across it, it can have all of my custom every time. Well, that night we had our show, but there warn't only about 12 people there, just enough to pay expenses, and they laughed all the time, and that made the Duke mad, and everybody left anyway before the show was over, but one boy, which was asleep. So the Duke said these Arkansas lunkheads couldn't come up to Shakespeare. What they wanted was low comedy, and maybe something ruther worse than low comedy, he reckoned. He said he could size their style. So next morning he got some big sheets of wrapping paper and some black paint and drawed off some handbills and stuck them up all over the village. The bills said, "At the courthouse! Exclamation! For 3 nights only! Exclamation! The world-renowned tragedians! David Garrick the Younger! Exclamation! And Edmund Kean the Elder! Exclamation! Of the London and Continental theatres, in their thrilling tragedy of the King's Camelopard, or the Royal Nonsuch! Exclamation! 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 Admission 50 cents. Then at the bottom was the biggest line of all, which said, "Ladies and children not admitted." "There," says he, "if that line don't fetch 'em, I don't know Arkansas."